Well, as I mentioned 48 hours ago, a little over, the Prime Minister of the country rearranged his cabinet with, I think, an acceptance that it wasn't working. And certainly he wasn't talking necessarily about New Zealand First or ACT ministers, and he couldn't have done anything about that anyhow. But he was looking at his own team and deciding that he had some weak performers. Now, Melissa Lee, I have to say, was a classic DIE appointment as a cabinet minister in the first place. She was appointed, I have very little doubt, primarily because of her ethnicity, had never been competent ever, never won a seat, had always performed poorly on the stage, and gave no confidence at all when she was the broadcasting minister, was sacked from that, and now, quite rightly, Christopher Luxon has got rid of her entirely from any ministerial role, and she's headed for the backbenches. But the one that surprised a lot of people, although it was rumoured 24 hours beforehand and certainly shocked the minister himself, was the demotion. He hasn't been shoved out of cabinet, but he's had the health portfolio removed from, and that was Dr Shane Reti, who we've interviewed on a number of occasions on the show. He seemed a competent man who knew his health portfolio well, but as far as Christopher Luxon was concerned, I'd given him 15 months in the job for reasons that have not been properly explained. He's gone, and he has been replaced by Simeon Brown, who has struck, I think, most people as being a pretty shrewd political operator, and maybe that's the reason why he is replacing Dr Reti in that troubled health portfolio. Well, somebody who's been dealing certainly with Dr Shane Reti over the last 15 months, probably longer than that in actual fact, and who will have to deal in his role, professional role, as the chair of General Practice New Zealand, is Dr Bryan Betty, and he joins us now. Dr Betty, well, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Happy New Year to you.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you, Michael, and good to be here.
Oh, well, good to talk to you again too. Listen, mate, what was your relationship like with Shane Reti?
Look, I always found Shane very approachable. He was very, very open, and I always found him very transparent. I think he had a deep understanding and depth of knowledge around the complexity of the health system and some of the issues some of the major issues we're now facing. So I always found Shane very good to deal with. He understood it, and I think he made some difficult behind-the-scenes calls over his time. Obviously the board was replaced with a commissioner. He moved to 4 regions across the health system because the one centralised Wellington system was obviously not working. So he was starting to introduce some changes, I thought, that were probably starting to head in the right direction. But look, I always found him very, very knowledgeable, very open, very transparent, and always willing to talk.
So what do you think were the reasons why he was shifted out of that portfolio? Do you think it was because he wasn't getting cut through with the media in particular, or he was making political mistakes?
Look, I think health is a very, very difficult portfolio. I think the problems we've got in New Zealand at this point have built up over the last couple of decades, and they are not easily fixed. There is no doubt about that whatsoever. It's like a super tanker that's just running ahead at its own steam, so things take time. Now, obviously, the decision that's been made is a political decision, and I think health is becoming one of the major, probably, issues for the government going forward in terms of the next election, and the Prime Minister's obviously made a call on that in order to probably see some more visibility over some of the changes that could or may happen. So look, political call by the Prime Minister. How that will play out, we will see over the next few months. But certainly a lot of the problems that we're faced with at the moment are not easily, rapidly fixed, and that's probably one of the things I'd have to say here.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but looking from the outside in, it does seem odd that in the 15 months that Dr Shane Reti was in that role, as you mentioned, the Commissioner, Lester Levy, took over essentially as a troubleshooter to replace the board, and it was almost a vote of no confidence, surely, and is it Maggie Apa, the Chief Executive of Health New Zealand, that she wasn't trusted to meet the targets. Did you get that feeling as well, Maggie Apa?
I got the feeling that really the health reforms that we've had over the last 4 to 5 years have been in a state of constant flux, state of constant change and reorganisation, and there has almost been a sense of paralysis over the health system, and that's one of the problems we've run headfirst into. Margie, I don't think we should be laying any one particular blame here. I think that's the wrong approach to this. But I think there's been a fundamental issue with the major shift that occurred in the health system with the collapsing of 32 DHBs or 30 DHBs or 25 DHBs, can't remember the number, into one central organisation that became very top-heavy and bureaucratic. And the sense of constant change, paralysis, reorganisation that's occurred since then, with no obvious progress in terms of the health system, with accumulating problems. We see ED times, we see pressures in general practice, we see workforce issues, we see now funding issues that have really emerged. So I think, the changes themselves have been problematic, and that's part of the issue we've run into.
The delivery, the one thing Shane Reti did introduce was these standards, minimum times in which people are going to be seen in ED and treated and things like that, those delivery targets. That was done under his, I think Lester Levy brought them in, but it was Shane Reti obviously who endorsed it around the cabinet table. Do those targets work? Do they concentrate the mind sufficiently to improve health services for ordinary people?
Look, I think there is a place for targets, and I think they do tend to concentrate the mind. There's always the issue of sort of gaming the system, which can occur. But things like ED targets, if you can unlock what's happening in emergency departments and get better flow and better efficiencies, and if those targets drive that, then that's actually a good thing. Immunisation rates, it's one of the critical problems we've got in New Zealand at the moment, is the low immunisation rates since COVID. And if those targets focus resource and focus activity on upping that, then that is a positive thing for the health of New Zealand. However, so I'm not anti-targets at all. They do have a place. They can, as you say, focus the mind. They are open for gaming. We know that. And they don't go to the underlying fundamental issues around funding and workforce that we do have, but they can produce some change in the system, which could be viewed as positive.
Yeah, actually, and on that immunisation rates issue, you're absolutely right. It's knocked off seriously, and it's particularly knocked off in those communities that most need it. We're talking about young children from particularly ethnic Maori and Pacific Island backgrounds who are most at risk from some of the third world diseases that seem to be resurfacing in this country. What happened? Why are these immunisation rates dropped off so badly? Is there a public trust factor here?